Welcome to the Bicurian Podcast, where we explore and embrace the seeming contradictions of life. What actually is Bicurian, you ask?
Well, you may not necessarily have a mental concept of Bicurian, partially maybe because it's a made-up word. You embody it. What's happening right now in terms of the divisions between us is a focus on that which is different.
And lack of understanding and empathy for people's beliefs is no longer an excuse.
And it is in the differences we carry in ourselves that we find the Bicurian moment.
When you really dig into something, you're going to see some depth to it. It's not just a race thing. It's not just a conservation thing.
It's letting go of the or to make room for the and. We embrace all of you. Welcome to the Bicurian.
Hi, I'm Isla.
And I'm Eric.
And this week we're going to have a short episode talking about happy holidays.
So we figured, with the holidays coming up, it'd be a good time to talk about something of a more personal nature, for ourselves and our listeners. And that is, what is the definition of happiness? What does happiness look like during this time of year? Isla and I both have experience with people in our lives that we're close to and acquaintances that have a rough time around the holidays. And I can truly say that for me, I mean, between some time off for work and my family being close and being able to spend a lot of time at holiday events and things like that, always been a very happy time for me, but other people do have a harder time.
Yeah, it can be a lonely time. I usually put something out there, usually on my blog or on Facebook, to just sort of, in the midst of all the holiday cheer, I think especially people who are grappling with depression or maybe aren't close to their family or they've lost a loved one, sometimes they can feel a sense of loneliness or being left out. So I try to acknowledge that.
Yeah, and I think that's wonderful. And I've always had a pretty open door policy on holiday gatherings and things like that for people that don't have family or something going on. And my family has come to expect that. But in general, I think it really just depends on your perspective. And this led us to some conversation that led to the topic choice here, because you had an article that you like to reference.
It's true, I do. I bought a copy of Psychology Today, 5 years ago. The title was, "What Do Happy People Do Differently?" And I thought, well, that would be interesting. What do they do differently? So their cover art worked and made a sale. And I kept the article because I found it to be very valuable information. And one of the things that they talked about in the little sidebars is, especially here in America, we have the pursuit of happiness as one of the inalienable rights.
Right.
Right.
We all can pursue happiness.
We can pursue it. And one of the statements they made is that while happiness has been shown to be an indicator of health, or a person who is happy tends to be healthier physically, there's a longevity thing attached to it, that the pursuit of happiness is often counterproductive to actually having happiness.
It sounds to me a little bit like the whole cliche of telling someone to relax.
Oh yeah, no, it's super effective, right?
I don't know that a lot of people get the idea that being told to relax is not usually relaxing for the recipient.
Yeah.
And pursuing happiness, according to this article, is something that actually leads people to being unhappy. And I can see that in some obvious ways, such as like materialistic pursuits,
Yeah. Well, one of the distinctions they make, and it's a distinction that I've actually made for myself in life, is sort of the difference between feeling good in the moment, like pleasure, and a sense of happiness. That, satisfaction or pleasure can be fleeting, something that occurs. Maybe you get a promotion, or you have an orgasm, or you go out and have an amazing concert experience, and those are things that are pleasurable. They provide a chemical reaction in your body. and or material benefits, such as the promotion might provide a financial benefit or something. And having pleasurable experiences can sometimes be confused with being happy. Like people who are happy don't have one pleasurable experience after another. They are actually more comfortable with the reality that there are some pleasurable experiences, there's some boring experiences, there are some not so good or bad experiences. It's just a mix. And that sometimes having really great pleasurable experiences can do something like the article was saying, that it it can raise your bar in a certain way. And so perhaps you get a promotion and then you go to your kid's soccer game and you don't actually enjoy it because your bar for feeling good has been raised by this other thing.
That makes some sense. I think there is a little bit of desensitization that can happen with experience. I could put it in my own experience, akin to seeing a certain amount of cynicism in myself and in other people my age. As we get older, we can become more cynical about things, and that's because what wowed me at 25 just doesn't strike me the same way at 40.
Mm.
And there is a certain amount of acceptance of that, but I can see how that would apply to just happiness in general. If your bar is a beach in Tahiti, then yeah, assumably for most of the weeks of the year when you're not there, you're unhappy by your own definition.
Right. And it's a sort of a studied phenomenon. And interestingly, there was an article that came out sometime in the last couple of years that said it was one of those clickbait titles, and the actual article was fairly solid with primary research and things like that. However, the gist of it was the people who are happiest in their relationships are the ones who have the lowest expectations. So if you really want your relationship to thrive, just set your bar a little bit lower. Stop being so.
So this brings me to something that I find is lacking sometimes, and I've been very conscious of it and trying to address it, and that is appreciation. Because ultimately, happiness can come from appreciating your own situation. I think back to the point of pursuit, when you're always wanting and never getting, or getting slowly, or thinking about how you could improve this or purchase that thing and make things better in your life, you're not actually appreciating where you're at. And I struggle with that. So, a lot of the time I spend thinking about ways in which I feel like my life would be better, not even materialistically, but just, in a different situation. What if I bought a bigger house, and had more space? Would I have more hobbies that I was into? I can be into a lot of hobbies personally. So, and I see that as like maybe room to do everything I want to do, which is still materialistic 'cause it involves purchasing a house, but, just creating a space. Will that make me happy instead of appreciating that? For example, the studio we're recording in right now is pretty well outfitted and actually serves us.
Yeah, it's really great. Appreciation and gratitude has been shown really consistently to lead to all sorts of actual health benefits. So I think that's definitely a factor. They don't actually mention it in terms of the happiness. The article in this particular article,
I totally extrapolated that.
but I don't think you're. Yeah, but no, I think it's a really good point, and I appreciate you bringing it forward. The other thing that I think about, especially with regards to the holidays, is that I know a lot of folks have expressed around me in my life a dissatisfaction with the consumerism of Christmas. And it, to me, is related to that sort of distinction again between sort of pleasure and happiness. There is a kind of a pleasure in being able to give gifts and receive gifts and share with people, share your abundance, whatever you have, with people that you care about. And it's easy also to get fixated on that and to think that's what's the whole the whole story. And another thing that they're really clear about in the article is they're not saying pleasure is bad or even that you shouldn't. They're like, yes, definitely. Like everybody needs to have some of these moments of pleasure and indulgence, and that's great. Then also couple it with purpose. So for the holidays, for example, doing something like one of the volunteering at a shelter or doing one of the gift giving things. Many of the stores have them. Also, lots of like, churches and community centers will do things for families. Like you can give a family a meal. A friend of mine, her birthday is in a couple weeks, and for her birthday, she bought 20 kits to make bags for foster kids for Christmas. And so we're all going to get together at her house and build these foster kid kit bags. I've never heard of this before. I'm like, what a great idea. Foster kids often have a lot of like transients, and this gives them, these kids will have some feeling of people care about us other than just the ones immediately around. So there's a lot of things like that, but the purpose thing they said is really important, that having a purpose, and they're clear. It's not always easy to find your purpose.
Well, and I think the consumerism that a lot of people are actually feeling is, you get bombarded with TV commercials and advertising this time of year, and people who think, oh, I don't watch TV or whatever. Well, let me assure you that you're probably seeing a lot of it on the internet, if not, because that's where we consume a lot of our media. But yeah, we do. We see that this is now a world where the reward at the end of the year is getting the gifts that you wanted.
Yeah.
I mean, Best Buy's tagline is, get what you wanted. Like it's all over their advertising every year.
Well, and I don't know if you had this experience. I know when I was a kid, the excitement of the holiday was partially rooted in my own helplessness to get the things that I wanted.
Right. We got our presents that we asked for from our parents or from Santa or whatever, and that was it. Like, and I had that experience too. Like Christmas was 5 or 6 big presents that I'd probably been holding out for most of the year.
So it was a big deal. It definitely was because I couldn't, until I was old enough to have a job, I couldn't work for it. I could just be good, not be naughty, and I got rewarded. And I just remember the moment as an adult when I realized that wasn't happening anymore, that I actually could sort of just do the things that I wanted to do.
Oh, I took that power and ran. I definitely have lived my life in a place where I know I'm hard to shop for around the holidays for people, because I'm not the kind of person who doesn't just go out and get that thing that I wanted.
Well, and also for me, that's when I started to understand the joy of giving. So I started to realize like, oh, that's why people get into that. When you realize you have the ability to secure the things that you want, you can also get to a point where you realize that there's no one thing that's going to make you happy. It's like, it's not the same as when you're a kid where that bike is going to be this mode of freedom and transportation for the next 3 years.
Right.
And so maybe I'll get some things and I'll, of course, appreciate them and the thoughtfulness of them. And then the reality, especially when I had kids, like, oh, I can do this thing I'm going to watch their face light up like the whole world.
Well, assumably our parents did that to us.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you got to pay it forward, I guess.
Right. So I think that's where that kind of came from, understanding their reasoning behind it. There was no reason that my mom had to spread things out over the year or give it to me all at once, but I think she tried to build that excitement.
Yeah. Well, there's something to anticipation. So there's one of the things they say, so you said this, you anticipated the article. If you want to envision a happy person's stance, imagine one foot rooted in the present with mindful appreciation of what one has, and the other foot reaching toward the future for yet to be uncovered sources of meaning.
And, thinking about that, my initial response is the future and what can come, but it doesn't have to be material.
Right.
It could be things that you're doing. Obviously, one of our themes that we have on this show a lot is involvement and going out and doing stuff. And you know what? Maybe it's the one time a year you do volunteer at a soup kitchen. Maybe it's something that you do to help out your friends because you open your doors to people who don't have family or maybe you just have a holiday party and everybody gets to connect. There's a lot of different things, and it doesn't all have to look like something. It's a mentality. One of the things you brought up when we were having the discussion about this topic, it's easy this time of year too to do things that feel good, bring instant pleasure, eat too much, enjoy the dessert afterwards, and all of that. And whether you feel regret or not about that, it's sort of a fleeting thing. But you know, and you're allowed to be happy and enjoy that you did that, and it was pleasurable. But realistically, I think it's good to ask oneself if that maybe plus giving, whether it's gifts or your time or volunteering or doing something from a truly altruistic place, won't be equally or slightly more fulfilling in some way.
Well, and that's exactly it. What you're saying is the combination of things, like really finding a way to do some things that are pleasurable and fun, indulgent, whatever, and also stay connected to some part of the purpose in your life. I feel one of the things that they were saying was actually a different article I was reading that said, if you spend all of your time wishing you were on vacation, or escaping from life, into video games or books, I guess, although I love books, but I will add them to the list, or movies or whatever, and you're not actually present with what's happening, you can be more and more difficult to deal with the real world, and a harder and harder time being in the world as it is.
I can see escapism as being a cause of unhappiness. I mean, and I think everybody does it at some point in some way. Even the most extroverted person might need to recharge the batteries or do something that, feels like it's for them. And you have to be careful not to fall into a trap of idealizing something that's not real.
Yeah.
Because
and that's
again,
like
it's just like,
nostalgia, right?
yeah, well, nostalgia is the idolization of memories and that sort of thing. Like we think, the 70s or the 80s or the 90s now were this nostalgically magical time and things were better, but that's just because the nature of memory, we're going to focus on the positives in it. But in doing so, it takes us out of the present, and it comes back to appreciation and appreciating what you have now, as opposed to worrying and missing the things that you don't have anymore.
Right. Well, and there are other things they talked about, such as happy people tend to take risks on occasion. So, a lot of us like to know we're going to feel good. We like to do things we know we like. And there's nothing wrong with that. And people who are happier overall tend to take risks on occasion so that they'll go to a restaurant, they'll order something and not know if they'll like it, or they'll go to a concert or a play or an experience without really being sure there's anything pleasant for them in the possibility. And so they're always discovering new things. And they said risk and also like curiosity, getting out of your comfort zone is actually a contributor to happiness. But and one of the commenters in the article said it's a little bit like being comfortable with anxiety, because it is a little anxious to do something unknown, whatever it is. I've always wanted to go to India. I went to India 3 years ago. And there's this part of me that was terrified because I went by myself and I'm getting on this plane to fly for 30 hours. And I'm like, I actually have no idea what I'm doing. Like, I'm getting on a plane right now. And okay, that's what's I was also just doing an unplanned trip. So like I had my first 4 days planned, and then I was just going to kind of follow my nose. So it was, and yet at the same time, that like there's a way that anxiety also made the whole thing kind of magical, right?
Yeah, I mean, and trying new things doesn't always have to be all about going and doing something completely crazy. Or
Are you saying that was crazy? Look at your face. Yes, you are.
well, and you know what? I mean, I have met plenty of people for which that is crazy and something they're comfortable with, but there becomes this myth that you have to do something absolutely crazy like that.
That's a fair point. It's also just ordering something you don't normally eat at dinner can be
Right.
considered a way to push your comfort zone.
And so I think, I think the key thing there is for people to think about it not in the, 6 month sabbatical to a foreign country, but also just maybe trying something different. Maybe um, you're unhappy in your job. Maybe wild and crazy is look for a new job or even a new career path. Maybe could find something that makes you feel more fulfilled. We end up in jobs where we may have the skills to do it, but it may not be fulfilling. And that's a way that you could, you know, s- I hate to use this term because we just said it's bad to, but pursue a happier position in life by trying something that maybe you're just nervous about. Start a business, go work for a career that suits who you are as a person instead of your skill set.
Yeah, that's a good point. I also know several years ago I was feeling a sense of being uncertain that I wanted to continue in the position that I was in. And I applied for a few jobs and I interviewed at a couple places and they were okay. Like they were interesting. And I was kind of reflecting that if I was going to take one of them, I needed to really apply myself in certain ways to making them work for me because they all had some things that I was going to have to put some effort into. And so I thought, well, what if I just take that effort and put it into what I'm doing right now and see what happens? And it was just an interesting moment to realize, like, if I'm going to have to do that anywhere, I could just do it where I am right now and see how that goes. And it did. It made a difference. I found myself reinvigorated and re-excited about what I was doing, recommitted. And it was the process of being willing to like walk away that helped me to realize that I had that. You would think it'd be obvious, but it wasn't.
Well, yeah, and again, that comes down to it. There is a myth that you need to do something big to shake things up. People feel like, I'm not ready to make that jump. It doesn't have to be. Could be a little thing, just little ways of looking at your life differently, applying things about yourself in a different way. So, again, the act of pursuing happiness is pretty futile, realistically. Like telling someone to relax, telling someone to be happy. Not likely to happen. Taking some steps, though, that could improve the situation, that make you feel more fulfilled. I mean, some of the most fulfilled people I've ever met are the ones that jumped ship on some sort of fruitful career that they were already knee deep in and started a business selling cupcakes or something like that.
Well, and the other thing that they were talked about so you're reminding me that a lot of it is counterintuitive in terms of the pursuit of happiness in some ways is working hard, seeking purpose, enjoying other people's good fortune. That's one that they said most happy people have friends who celebrate with them, not just friends who show up for them in need. That's a big difference.
So, this actually brings up something that you did mention about the article and the idea that, and to me, it kind of struck me in ways that you can kind of share in somebody's happiness instead of feeling like personalizing it, or and feeling like maybe your life's not as good as theirs or whatever. And the subject that they brought up that you told me about wasn't my favorite one, um because our society and culture is not great about this. But if somebody meets somebody and they hit it off and you're not currently dating somebody or something, and you don't want them to talk about it, but really those people need to talk about it. Like, we need to share our happiness with people. And sometimes a good place to be that I found is, okay, my life's rough, but I'm gonna listen to what this person's positive experience was, and just at least be happy for them.
Yeah.
And not make it about how I'm inferior or can't compete, or should feel bad because I'm not having the luck they're having or whatever.
Yeah, they said that's a really powerful experience. Actually, it will benefit you. You will be, even if you're not aware of it, you will be buoyed up if you can allow yourself to be happy for them. They will be buoyed up because they get to share it with you. And it also gives them something stronger to remember. So when they're facing a bump, they can actually call back that positive experience more easily. And it can be part of a cushion for when they're in a rough time. So it's a really great thing for everyone involved. And they even said, this one researcher said that the happiest people are ones who celebrate, who are present when things go right for others, and whose own wins are regularly celebrated by their friends. And romantic partners that fail to make a big deal out of each other's success are more likely to break up.
Yeah. I can guarantee that not feeling like I have cheerleaders around me would hurt. And it would equally be painful for me, this is just my personality, to not be a cheerleader for others. So I can totally see that. And I think in some regards, life is a social experience. And that's one of the positive ways that we socialize. So acknowledging that and understanding that it's necessary, it may change your approach to it instead of being cynical or deriding about that subject, when it's brought up. Maybe just understand that good things can happen to everybody and celebrating them amongst everybody. That's one of the big social gifts we get in this life.
Yeah. Well, and part of that is also, they say, recognizing sometimes you're going to feel bad and don't make a big deal out of it. Not that you don't express it, but don't focus on that. And that's the other thing, is don't focus on the things that are bad. They said that people who are happy are less likely to notice micro facial expressions. So if I'm talking and someone has a momentary negative experience, and quite likely has nothing to do with what I'm saying, right? Like, people are always in their heads, often in their heads anyway. Rather than fixating on that, oh no, they made a frown, what does that mean? Just not noticing it or letting it go. And people who are happier just tend not to notice it.
Yeah.
So
this week we had planned a shorter show. We just kind of wanted to talk about, all of that. I think to wrap up kind of our discussion here, the main thing that I'm taking away from our offline discussion that we're bringing online is, I'm planning to really focus on appreciation and enjoying the little things. Such a cliche word, but how many of us actually do that? Actually stop and just enjoy the little things, I can't remember if you said this earlier when we were recording or not, but what was your definition of happiness? Like,
So I'd say satisfaction is momentary, and then happiness is something that lasts over time.
yeah,
And it's a sense
I
of
like that
peace.
one. You gave another one though, and I'm spacing exactly what it was, but essentially it was along the lines of happiness is good health and
Oh, it was
bad memories.
Yeah, I said it in the show too. It's like it's the quote from this gentleman, Nobel laureate Albert Schweitzer. I'm sure you've heard of him.
Yes.
Said happiness is nothing more than good health and a bad memory.
Yeah, but to a certain extent, it is, I think, the time of year to be thankful and be appreciative and maybe give a little bit and enjoy the things you get or the food you eat or the things you do. Like, all together, maybe that combined experience will give you a little bit of happiness.
I hope so. Happy holidays.
So we're going to wrap up the show early. Like I said, thank you for listening in this busy holiday season. But if you have any ideas, feedback, thoughts, please find us on social media. We are Bicurian on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Or you can give us a call at 720-507-7309. And you can always email us at podcast@bicurian.com.
And if you like what we are doing, please rate us on your listening platform of choice. Thank you.
Thank you.